Hamas published a new hostage video showing Alon for the second time this month. In the United Nations, 10 more states recognize the state of Palestine. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu vowed that there will never be a Palestinian state west of the Jordan River. Trump's team is pushing for a 21-point program to bring a quick end to the war, while meanwhile in Gaza, fighting continues to intensify. Massive bombings are reported throughout Gaza City as some 700,000 Palestinians evacuate the area southward. You're watching the Israel-Palestine Report with Professor Alon Burstein. Hit that subscribe button. Let's dive in. On Monday, September 22nd, Hamas published a hostage video showing Alon Ohel. This is the second video in which Ohel has appeared since he was kidnapped during the October 7th attack nearly 2 years ago, and is the first hostage video recorded by the Al-Qassam brigades since the assassination of the Al-Qassam spokesperson and the person who was in charge of these films, Abu Ubaidah. The 2-minute video opens with the images of a series of hostages who have died in captivity, either those that were killed by the IDF or executed by Hamas, with a saying written across them, "Netanyahu knows them all," appearing in Hebrew and in Arabic. It then turns to images of Ohel watching television and seeing Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu stating that he will bring back the hostages using new methods. Ohel asks rhetorically if anyone still believes Netanyahu, then turns to appeal to his family and thanks them for all that they are doing in order to try to bring about his release. He chastises the Israeli government for turning the support of the hostages in Israel into a crime, and says that while the hostages draw strength from the protests in Israel, the hostages' fate has in fact been determined by the Israeli government's actions, and this he is implying Israel's push further into Gaza City and, theoretically later, into the areas of central Gaza. Ohel then appeals to the United States, and specifically to Steve Witkoff, asking Witkoff to not let Netanyahu kill us all, and asking the U.S. administration to stop supporting Netanyahu and his government, saying that Netanyahu's war is against the people of Israel and against the Israeli hostages, not against Hamas. The video ends in a manner that is only somewhat reminiscent of the previous videos, and I will say in a moment of analysis that this may reflect the change in the Al-Qassam leadership and the fact that Abu Ubaidah is no longer in charge of this. The video ends with an hourglass stating time is running out in Hebrew, Arabic, and English, but it does not end with the same fade-out music as the previous hostage videos, and also, unlike the previous videos, it does not state that hostages will only be returned in a hostage deal. The message of this video that Hamas is trying to give out seemingly is much more about pressure on Israel to stop the upcoming invasion into Gaza City, rather than specifically in support of a deal. Just as a reminder, there are still 48 hostages that are held by Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip. Israel has declared that 26 of them are dead and their bodies are held hostage, and 2 more are likely dead, leaving 20 that are considered alive by Israel. U.S. President Trump, in turn, has repeatedly stated in recent weeks that an increasing amount of hostages are dead. In his last statements, on that same day that the video was published, he said that 38 hostages are dead in the Gaza Strip. Israel has repeatedly said they are not sure why Trump is stating these different numbers, and that is the current situation. Trump is stating that 38 out of the 48 hostages are dead, leaving only 10 alive, while Israel is saying that according to Israeli numbers, 20 of them are considered alive. On the negotiation front, the negotiations between Israel and Hamas have been officially frozen since Israel's failed assassination attempt of the Hamas leadership in Qatar. This happened on September 9th. Despite this, it was a very significant week on the negotiation front because a new framework for a ceasefire agreement that reportedly includes the release of all hostages and an end to the war has been proposed by U.S. President Trump. Rumors about this plan began surfacing in an Axios report already at the beginning of the week, and it became official during a meeting that was held on September 23rd in New York. This meeting happened alongside the UN General Assembly meeting, when U.S. President Trump held a special meeting with the leaders of a series of Arab and Muslim countries, focused specifically on discussing an end to the war in Gaza. During that meeting, Trump presented a 21-point plan which his team had developed, termed by those involved a quote-unquote vision for peace. Now, the plan itself has not been made public, so I'll say that there's a plethora of rumors about what those 21 points actually include. What I'm going to report is a summary that I have drawn of the various rumors from outlets in the Saudi Al Arabiya, the Saudi Al Hadath, the Washington Post, CNN, the Israeli Haaretz, Axios, and several other different news outlets. Each have reported different rumors about what those 21 points actually include. With regards to the truce and the hostage deal, the plan reportedly includes an immediate truce being declared between the sides, and the release of all hostages in one phase rather than a staggered release. The sources were somewhat conflicted about the specific timing of the release. CNN reported that the hostages would be released within 48 hours of the truce, while the Lebanese Al Nashra reported that the hostages would only be released 20 days after the truce began. The Washington Post is the only news outlet that reported about the Palestinian prisoners that would be released in exchange for the release of the hostages. According to the Post, in exchange for the release of the Israeli hostages, Israel would release 250 Palestinian prisoners that are serving life sentences in Israeli jails, as well as 1,700 Palestinians that have been arrested since the October 7th attack in the Gaza Strip. The Post also added that in exchange for each body of a hostage that is returned, Israel would return the remains of 15 Palestinians whose bodies are held by Israel. With regards to the security and governing mechanisms in the Gaza Strip, the plan reportedly states that after the release of all hostages, the Israeli military will gradually withdraw from the Gaza Strip, and this will be done in parallel to the establishment of a new governing mechanism in Gaza that will include troops from Arab and Muslim countries as a security force, and will be run by an international authority that will receive its mandate directly from the UN Security Council. The Israeli Haaretz newspaper reported that the U.S. administration is hoping that this international governing body will be led by Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and former UN emissary to the conflict. Different news outlets gave conflicting details as to what exactly the mandate of this new governing body would be and also what its aim will be, but most agreed that the aim will broadly be to oversee the rebuilding of Gaza and to eventually hand civil authority over the Strip to the Palestinian Authority. Some sources suggested that there was no time frame as to how long this would take before the Palestinian Authority might take responsibility for the Gaza Strip. Others said it explicitly and even gave a specific timetable of 3 years until this is done. Again, all of the different outlets agreed that the aim will be eventually to hand this over to the Palestinian Authority, but they were conflicting as to how this will be done and what time frame. During this time, while the international governing body would be taking responsibility for the Gaza Strip, Israel would reportedly still be responsible for stopping weapons smuggling into Gaza. The funding for all these projects in Gaza's rebuilding, according to the plan, is going to come from different Arab states and will include the establishment of an international fund that is administered by Saudi Arabia. With regards to Hamas's presence in Gaza, several sources suggested that Israel would grant safe passage to the Hamas leadership and to Hamas militants who want to leave the Gaza Strip, and those who, quote, commit to peaceful coexistence, end quote, would be offered amnesty and would be allowed to remain in the Gaza Strip. Regarding Hamas's military capabilities, the Washington Post was again the only source that stated that the plan includes the destruction of all of Hamas's weaponry in the Gaza Strip, although no information was given as to how this would be done, if Hamas would hand over the weaponry, hand over the Palestinian Authority, if this would be confiscated by the Arab armies. It was not said. It was also no mention of the weaponry and militant capabilities of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad or other factions in the Gaza Strip. And again, I'll say the Post was the only one that even referenced this idea of demilitarizing Hamas. It was not mentioned in any of the other news outlets. Finally, with regards to the entrance of humanitarian aid, the plan reportedly includes a major increase in the entrance of humanitarian aid into Gaza, and the plan is explicit about the fact that this aid will be distributed by the United Nations. However, according to reports, the plan is not explicit about what will happen to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Will it be disbanded? Will it continue to operate in tandem? It does not relate to that, but it does say that all the aid will be distributed by the United Nations. Regarding the agreement and possible implementation of this plan, the different Arab and Muslim leaders that met with Trump on September 23rd reportedly all agreed to the plan. However, they raised some demands of their own. According to reports, these include that Israel will not be permitted to annex any part of Gaza or any part of the West Bank, that there be no settlements in Gaza or expulsion of Palestinians from Gaza, and that the status of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem will not be changed. According to most of those reports, Trump agreed to these demands, and I'll say also that these rumors received some significant confirmation when 2 days later, President Trump was asked on September 25th about the Israeli annexation of the West Bank and stated unequivocally, quote, "I will not allow it. It is not going to happen. I will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank," adding, "It has been enough. It's time to stop now," end quote. In addition to that, I'll say that a day later, the Saudi Foreign Minister, Faisal bin Farhan, announced the establishment of an international fund coalition to help fund the Palestinian Authority, seemingly also beginning to take part in implementing that plan that Saudi Arabia will organize this international fund. Now, taking a step back from all these reports, however, I'm going to say that it's important to note that the two parties that are actually fighting in the Gaza Strip, Israel and Hamas, have themselves not been involved thus far in these negotiations, and according to some reports, they have not even been given an official copy of these plans. So far, these plans are being negotiated between the United States and different Arab and Muslim states. Hamas issued several statements over the last days, saying that the group welcomes any initiative to end the war, but will only respond once it receives the official offer through Qatar. With regards to Israel, throughout the week there were increasing rumors that Israel is coming under substantial pressure from the United States to accept this plan, with some reports stating that during a series of meetings between Trump's emissaries, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, and between the emissary of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, Ron Dermer was explicitly told that Trump expects Israel to accept this deal and end the war, and that Witkoff and Kushner were instructed to specifically say, "Bibi, it's time." All this is leading up to a crucial meeting that is scheduled to happen between U.S. President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu on Monday, a meeting that is being described by most analysts as the most significant meeting that will determine the trajectory of the war. Again, at this point, it seems that U.S. President Trump is pushing for the implementation of this plan. Seemingly, he expects that Qatar and the other Arab countries will be able to compel Hamas into agreeing, and possibly the United States wants to compel Israel into agreeing. We don't know exactly what's going to happen when Qatar gives that proposal to Hamas. There is this meeting happening between Trump and Netanyahu on Monday. We'll learn more about what is happening after that meeting and as things develop. Alongside this, it was also a very intensive week of fighting in the Gaza Strip, and specifically in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, where intensive fighting and airstrikes were reported almost every day in the areas of Gaza City, that is these areas over here. Both the IDF and the Al-Qassam brigades reported intensive fighting in the areas of Tel al-Halwa of Gaza City on September 22nd, with the Al-Qassam brigades taking responsibility for hitting IDF tanks with Yasin 105 missiles. On September 23rd, the Israeli military reported targeting a Palestinian unit that was planting explosives in the areas of Gaza City, and intensive fighting was also reported on the following day when Hamas operatives carried out an ambush on IDF troops in the northern parts, again, of Gaza City. The Israeli military reported uncovering a large booby-trapped structure array with massive weaponry and weapons caches that Hamas had planted in northern Gaza on September 25th. And Palestinian sources reported massive airstrikes in the area throughout the rest of that day. On that same day, I also reported an unusual incident was reported when Palestinian operatives attempted to fire a missile at an IDF helicopter that was in the air in the Gaza Strip. The missile, which was reportedly a shoulder-mounted launch, failed. However, such weaponry is quite rare in the Gaza Strip, and thus the fact that it is all of a sudden being introduced at this stage of the fighting in the war is something that I'll say is noteworthy. If we see this happening more, then it may be somewhat of a game changer if those shoulder-mounted missiles end up actually making a difference. In addition to all this, 3 rockets were fired from the Gaza Strip towards southern Israel throughout the last week. 2 of them targeted the areas of Ashdod and Nitzana, that is this area over here that is farther than most of the rockets have been launched in the last several months. All 3 of those rockets were intercepted or hit in open field areas. Regarding casualties, the IDF reported that 2 IDF soldiers were killed in the fighting in the Gaza Strip over the last week, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers killed in Gaza since the invasion began to 466, and 2,924 soldiers reported injured. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip, in turn, reported that 698 Palestinians were killed throughout the Gaza Strip over the past week, bringing the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 65,926, and 167,518 Palestinians reported injured in the Gaza Strip. I remind everyone the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip does not distinguish between civilians and militants. It simply reports the entire number of Palestinians that have been brought through Palestinian hospitals and declared dead. In addition to this, as a result of the fighting in northern Gaza, 2 more things happened throughout the week. Jordan announced on September 23rd that they are being forced to relocate the field hospital that the country had established in Gaza City to the southern areas of Gaza, to the areas of Han Yunis, and according to reports, this was done due to an IDF evacuation order. In addition, on September 26, Doctors Without Borders announced the cessation of their activities in the Gaza Strip, stating that their clinics are completely encircled by Israeli forces, and thus the movement has no choice but to suspend its activities in this area. Before I conclude, I'm going to say a few things about the diplomatic arena over the last week as well. Leading up to the UN General Assembly meetings earlier in the week, 10 different countries announced their formal recognition of the State of Palestine. France and the United Kingdom are arguably the 2 most significant ones on the list due to their position in the UN Security Council. However, other countries include long-standing allies of Israel as well. Among them is Canada and Australia. In addition to these, Portugal, Belgium, Luxembourg, Malta, Monaco, and Andorra all also recognize the State of Palestine. Now, I'm not going to get into the diplomatic significance of this recognition, but I will say that if you are interested in the importance of this recognition, feel free to check out my previous interview that I uploaded to my channel on September 23rd, where I discuss these developments at length. With regards to Israel's response, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu published a recording immediately after those recognitions, stating that those states that recognize Palestine are rewarding acts of terrorism, and that regardless, quote, "it will not happen, there will be no Palestinian state west of the Jordan River," end quote. U.S. President Trump also chastised this move during his speech at the UN General Assembly, also saying that such recognition is a reward for terrorism. In addition to this, during the past week, Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas addressed the General Assembly in the United Nations via video conference, and I'll say that he did this through video conference because the United States refused to issue him a visa to attend personally. In his speech, he heavily criticized Israel for the ongoing situation in the Gaza Strip and called on all nations to band together to stop the war. He thanked those countries who recognize the State of Palestine and said that this is a step towards peace. And then he appealed to Israel to capitalize on this and return to negotiations with the Palestinian Authority in order to reach a 2-state solution. In addition to this, I'm also going to say that Abbas went to great lengths in order to present a more moderate stance of the Palestinian leadership. Among others, he called for the immediate release of all hostages that are held in the Gaza Strip alongside a complete ceasefire, and stated that Hamas will have no part in governing Gaza in the future. He also denounced the October 7th attack and emphasized that the Palestinian Authority has recognized Israel's right to exist. And he also called internationally to distinguish between solidarity with the Palestinian cause and international anti-Semitism, which he also condemned, as he wished Jews of the world a Happy New Year for the Jewish holiday. He continued to pledge that the Palestinian Authority will carry out deep reforms and will stop paying Palestinian prisoners within 2 years, and stated that, quote, "We want a modern democratic state based on the rule of law, equality, justice, and empowering women and youth," end quote. In a moment of analysis, I'm going to say that Abbas was seemingly using all the right rhetoric to align himself with the new Trump proposal and what is being advocated by the different Arab states, and his speech was seen as quote-unquote moderate enough that it was even condemned heavily by Hamas 2 days later, that called it an identification with the Zionist plot. 3 days later, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke with the United Nations General Assembly as well. Despite a major walkout of delegates before his speech, Netanyahu addressed the assembly and he wore on his coat a pin with a QR code on it that leads to a website showing videos and images from the October 7th attack. At the beginning of his speech, Netanyahu stated that Israel took over the phones of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and that parts of his speech are being heard through them as well. And then he proceeded to read out the names of the 20 hostages considered to be alive by Israel and said that they have not been forgotten. And he also appealed directly to the Gazan population and stated that the war could end immediately if the hostages were released, Hamas disarms, and Gaza demilitarized. More broadly, Netanyahu stated that Israel is fighting a just war against Hamas and that it has done all it can to avoid Palestinian civilians being hurt, while adding that Hamas does all it can to ensure that the most amount of Palestinians suffer and are killed. He added that Israel has allowed 2 million tons of food into the Gaza Strip, stating that that amounts to 1 ton of aid for every man, woman, and child in Gaza, and added cynically that is some policy of starvation. Regarding the recognition of Palestine, he chastised leaders for recognizing a Palestinian state, saying, quote, "You cannot avoid the jihad storm by sacrificing Israel," end quote. In addition, he stated that establishing a Palestinian state after October 7th is akin to establishing a mosque in New York immediately after the 9/11 attack, and continued with that comparison by stating that, again quote, "Giving the Palestinians a state near Jerusalem is like giving Al-Qaeda a state near New York," end quote. In addition, Netanyahu repeatedly thanked U.S. President Trump for his leadership and support, and emphasized the cooperation in attacking Iran and its allies in the region. With that, I'm going to remind everyone the very important meeting between Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and U.S. President Trump is due to take place on Monday. It will likely become clearer after that the extent to which the U.S. is planning to pressure Israel to accept Trump's plan and move towards an end to the war. We don't know yet what kind of pressure Arab states may mount on Hamas. Obviously, remains to be seen. That concludes my latest highlight on the Israel-Palestine Report. If you find these reports informative, please do remember to send them on to anyone you think might be interested in them. Hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know when reports come out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'm Alon Burstein. I'm a visiting assistant professor and Israel Institute fellow in the Department of Political Science at Tufts University. Thanks for watching.